Hi, my name is Graham Close. I'm a Professor of Human Physiology here at Liverpool John Moores University. I'm not a huge fan of this concept of the superfoods. I think all foods are pretty good for you if we take them the right time, the right place, with obviously some exceptions. I'm a huge fan of everyone trying to increase the amount of vegetables in the diet. So I would say that's the first tip I would give people. And it shouldn't just be your favourites. So if somebody likes garden peas, let's not eat peas every day. What we're looking for is a wide variety of the different fruits and vegetables. I'm a huge believer that most people, especially as we get a little bit older, don't eat enough protein. So a big fan of trying to increase the amount of protein in the diet. And I don't mean taking supplements, but I mean by looking at increasing the amount of lean meats, eggs, fish, and vegetable proteins. I mentioned fish then, so I'm a big fan of people trying to increase the amount of fish in the diet, and one of the portions at least should be an oily fish, if not twice a week. Most of the people are a little bit deficient in the omega-3s that we get in the oily fish, so yeah, a big fan of that. So if I was to give you 3 tips, it would be increase the amount of fish, increase the amount of vegetables, and get a good amount of protein into your diet on a daily basis. Beat the winter blues, now there's a good question. I would say I'll give you one really good tip, and the tip is that in the winter we know most people are going to become vitamin D deficient, and we know there's a huge relationship between our mood and vitamin D, and that might be why in the summer we feel a little bit better, and the winter some people do get the winter blues. Unfortunately, we get vitamin D from sunlight, so living where we do at the moment, we're not going to see much of that big yellow thing. So unfortunately, this is one example where we might need a little supplement. So we don't need a huge amount, around about 1,000 to 2,000 international units per day of vitamin D3, and you might see a big increase in mood. There's been a big increase in the number of vegan athletes that I'm working with at the moment, which can be traced back to a few documentaries where it's really promoted a vegan diet, and actually rather than promote the vegan diet has really been anti-meat eating diets. Now, I'm happy to promote the advantages of increasing the amount of fruit and vegetables and them type of products in the diet. I don't believe there's a big disadvantage of having a meat diet, but by switching to a vegan-based diet, what we often see is people eating a lot less processed foods, eating more vegetables, eating more whole grains. So there can be some health advantages. There are things that we need to be aware of if we're moving to a vegan diet. Often we can be lower in the amount of protein, and I mentioned previously how important that is. There are certain vitamins that we won't get from a vegan diet, such as B12, so we would need to look to supplement with that. And I would also, from an athletic perspective, be a little bit worried about the iron, creatine, and beta-alanine, so things that are really important for athletes. But look, if someone's got a terrible diet and they switch to a vegan-based diet with the right advice and they increase the amount of healthy vegetables they eat, it can actually offer some health advantages. I actually quite like this flexitarian approach where we do increase our fruits and vegetables, but we're also topping that up with some good quality lean meats. So we've all been told that breakfast is the most important meal of the day. And you know what, it's only been the last couple of years where people have begun to question that advice and even look to where that statement came from. Now, as far as I can see, you can chase it back to the early 20s to try and promote breakfast cereals. And actually there's no real evidence that the breakfast is the most important meal of the day. Having said that, I think getting off to a good start in the morning, so getting some good quality protein into you, so maybe like an omelette with some high quality carbohydrates and some vegetables as well in the morning, isn't a bad thing. But overall, we've got to look at the total daily energy intake we're going to achieve and try and eat in a manner whereby we're not feeling hungry and we're not just having convenient snacks. So I would avoid the little convenience breakfast, so the grab it and go type mentality. I would get up that little bit earlier and cook something from scratch, probably get you off to a much better start to the day. I get asked a lot about eating well on a budget, particularly from parents who are maybe trying to get the child to eat well, but actually presuming that healthy eating is quite an expensive thing, and it really isn't. So there's lots of tips that we can give you. So if we think about a good diet, we build it around high quality proteins, good vegetable produce, and then high quality carbohydrates. In terms of the protein, start thinking about things like get a chicken and cook it yourself rather than buying a chicken breast or buying a pre-cooked chicken. That can save quite a considerable amount of money. Things like tins of tuna are a really cheap way to get protein. Things like shin of beef and even offal is a great way to get high quality protein in with a real small budget. When it comes to the vegetables, don't be put off by frozen vegetables. This can reduce wastage, and if we reduce wastage, we can save a lot of money. And then when it comes to the high quality carbohydrates, don't be buying the packets of rice you just need to microwave. They can be really expensive. Get a big bag of rice and cook it yourself from scratch. So if you was actually to choose different cuts of meat, you was to use some frozen vegetables and actually cook things like rice from scratch, you can eat really well for probably under £4 to £5 per day. It's really it's a real great question to ask me, are oranges a good half-time food? Because it was only last week I was speaking with my colleague here, Professor James Morton, about is it time to bring back the half-time orange? So as a child, that's what we all had. We've now moved on to more things like sports drinks and gels and foods like that. But if we think about what we're trying to achieve at half-time, where we're trying to give ourselves some glucose and some fructose. So the glucose will be for immediate blood sugar levels, and the fructose to help replace liver glycogen, which will then allow for blood sugar to be continued throughout that second half. Well, an orange is basically a combination of glucose and fructose. So actually, especially when we're thinking about maybe like children's football teams and things like that, I think the half-time orange is a bad idea. Bring back the orange. Yeah, so protein shakes have got a lot of attention, positive and negative over years. Obviously they're very commercially viable, and there's a lot of companies making a lot of money from protein shakes. Ultimately, as I said at the beginning, I think most people need to increase the amount of protein they have in their diet, and I'd love them to do that by real foods. If, however, that isn't possible, then actually then using a protein shake can be a good thing. What we need to be careful of is that we make it, especially if you're a tested athlete, there's a massive risk of supplement contamination. So we need to make sure that it's tested to stop any false positive drugs tests. So I would always focus on food first and try and get your protein intake to what it should be. If then we need to top it up, then maybe we could consider a protein shake. But don't think it's anything magical. Ultimately, a protein shake is just filtered milk. So there's nothing magical in there, but negative or positive can be useful at some times. So there's been a recent study that suggests that either being overweight or actually having been slightly underweight or being on your ideal weight could all be related to our genes. And this was a large study published in a really good journal that showed that those who were particularly lean had a certain gene type compared with those who were maybe slightly overweight. Now we could read that and be a little bit off-put and think, there's nothing we can do, but I honestly believe that couldn't be further from the truth. What we do know about our genes, there are certain genes related to things like appetite. So if you've got that gene set, there's a fair chance that actually you might feel hungrier than other people, so you choose to eat more food. Ultimately though, it does come down to our own choice. So an awareness that you maybe have that gene type that makes you hungrier than others isn't a bad thing, but just maybe plan our day a little bit more. So for example, I've done that today. I know that tonight is Friday night. I enjoy my Friday night dinner. So I've gone quite lean today at breakfast and lunch, and I'm going to really enjoy that dinner tonight. So for unbiased diet advice, it can be a hard thing these days because everyone's got a book to sell or a product to sell. The first thing I would say is, from a pure dietetics perspective, you can't go far wrong looking at the British Dietetic Association. The BDA have some great fact sheets. Now, an offshoot of the BDA is an organisation that I'm heavily involved with called the Sport and Exercise Nutrition Register, SENR, and that's run by the BDA, the British Dietetic Association. And there you'll find qualified individuals who are trained in sport nutrition to offer credible, qualified advice. So I would start off with a BDA, and if it's sport related, look for people who are SENR accredited.